Uh, Excellent. You can hear me. Everyone can hear me? Firstly, thank you so much for that generous welcome. For someone who focuses on crime a lot, it's really nice to hear kind, warm, sort of soft words. It's not normal in my field. And thank you all for making the time to be here. It's a Friday afternoon, and we are going to talk about crime. So I really appreciate you putting in the time and making your way here. And I really, really hope to see you all at the next talk on the 30th of January, but I will beg you in good time. So let's start. Organized crime on our doorstep, exposing the underworld's extensive reach. Okay, and we've got different faces on here, as you can see. I'll go into these later, and a crime scene. So I'm going to start with the basics. Please forgive me, but it's like do re mi. We start at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start, actually. So what is organized crime and the so-called underworld, right? And the reason I'm saying so-called underworld is because, and I've even made a note to remind myself to say this out loud and upfront, there is actually no such thing as the underworld. There's no separate world from us. What we're talking about is inherited, and I mean over time, webs of illicit and licit or legal activity. So it's all intertwined. And even if we want to separate ourselves from it, it's really difficult, as you'll see as I talk. So it's visible and invisible. A lot of people think, oh, organized crime, gangsterism, shootings, bullets, guns. Nope, nope, nope. Remember money laundering, remember racketeering. It's the things happening behind closed doors, the things we can't see. Yeah. And let's not forget that organized crime is really greed that exploits desperation. And if you look at the crime bosses and you look at the people, for example, let's take a very classic case of drug running. We've got the kingpin or queenpin and the person at the bottom actually running around the streets selling those drugs. They live very different situations. They've got very different incomes. The person more likely to die is that person. And while I can't exonerate crime, I also can't ignore the fact that there are different factors forcing it or creating it. And yeah, we may not know we're supporting organized crime. This terrifies me every day. You wake up every day thinking certain names. I wake up every day like, oh my gosh, please, please don't let me do something like X, Y, and Z. So yeah, organized crime, the so-called underworld, is what's happening around us all the time. And it's infuriating because it's land, air, and sea. It's our environments. It's where we're living. It's how we're living. It's basically what we're eating. So I'm going to start here for a very specific reason, because it sort of ties in with what I've just said about waking up and actually fearing that I'm accidentally supporting organized crime. Do we know who said these words? The Johannesburg restaurant was eventually sold, and with the profit, I managed to start an import and export business and also became involved in the buying and selling of secondhand goods. Does anyone know who said it? It's a very weird, random quote, but okay, so those are the words in an affidavit of a man named Sasa Kovacevic. Okay, anybody know who Sasa Kovacevic is? He actually probably did live in Bedfordview. This is so exciting. Sorry. I get very excited, excuse me, but yes. And he then moved to Cape Town. Sasa Kovacevic is actually Dobrislav Gavric, a Serbian convicted of killing one of Europe's most feared warlords. I'm going to not pronounce this correctly, so please excuse me. Zalzko Raznatovic. Okay, he was better known as Arkan. So here we have Sasa Kovacevic in the Cape Town Magistrates Court because he was eventually arrested. He used the false name Sasa Kovacevic, but he was actually a wanted convict, okay? And his identity became apparent in 2011 following the murder of a so-called underworld suspect, rumored intel agent who basically flip-flopped between supporting apartheid and then supporting democracy, Cyril Biko. Okay, so had you been to that Johannesburg restaurant and you had a meal there and a lovely drink or whatever, you could have potentially been putting money into an internationally wanted assassin's pocket. And that's why I say it always gives me a bit of like, I'm writing and I sound holier than thou. I'm not. And I'm so scared I will accidentally support organized crime. So yeah, like I mentioned earlier, Organized crime has no borders. While there are shootings or a higher rate of shootings in specific areas, specifically in the Western Cape, we can trace that back to the Group Areas Act and where people were dumped, where lots of people were forced into smaller areas. And that's where you see, to this day, increased shootings or higher rates of shootings. But at the end of the day, you can have a shooting in Constantia over there, and you can have a shooting in Lavender Hill over here. This is organized crime, okay? And when I say it has no borders, oh my gosh, let's go to the next slide. So this is a lady by the name of Ruja Ignatova, okay? She is wanted by the FBI. She's on their top 10 wanted list. She's from Bulgaria originally, and she co-founded something called OneCoin, it turned out to be a crypto scheme of note, a scam, okay? She is still one of the world's most wanted individuals, if we are to believe certain authorities. This case is so crazy, so I really urge you, I'm going to punt Daily Maverick here a little, but please check Daily Maverick's YouTube video. It's new, it only came out this week on Ruja Ignatova, because it explains how one of the world's most wanted crypto scam, she's also known as the crypto queen, how she may actually be hiding out in South Africa, okay? So the murder scene or the crime scene we saw, I'll go back for us quickly, the one we saw before this. Let me use the laser because it's so, but yeah. That is where Krasimir Kamenov, his wife, Gagana, and 2 of the employees were murdered, okay? And that's in Constantia. And if you follow the threads of that murder that happened in May 2023, you start getting these weird, like, it almost seems fake, it's so crazy, but it actually leads to Ruja Ignatova. So this is really scary because we think of organized crime or like little crimes. These are such intense webs, and we're talking state capture in Bulgaria. This case really bleeds into such a mess. And again, I just reiterate, in November last year, German police confirmed to me they don't think she was murdered at sea, as is the theory that's doing the rounds. They think she may be in South Africa. By the way, the FBI offered a $5 million reward. So if any of you see her, come tell me, we'll work something out. So another crime or crimes that really emphasize the fact that there are no borders here, drug trafficking. So that's a story I did for Daily Maverick in November, December last year, and it's terrifying. We know in the United States that fentanyl, an opioid is driving an overdose crisis. And like so US authorities have warned, if you take a little bit of fentanyl, like on the tip of a pencil, it can kill you. And we know that fentanyl has, and I quote the head of the Hawks, it's entered the conveyor belts of drug trafficking in South Africa. So that's something we really, really have to keep an eye on. And here we go. So this is a police supplied image. This was taken during a raid at a farm near Groblersdal. Okay, the farm was raided in July last year. And they found like this giant alleged drug lab. And they arrested 5 people, and 3 of those people are from Mexico. And the head of the Hawks has said that the 3 Mexican suspects may be from the Sinaloa cartel, which means that one of the deadliest criminal organizations on the planet is active in South Africa, okay? And if you check out the Daily Maverick article I did, it wasn't just based on 3 suspects who may be linked to the Sinaloa cartel. There's a lot of evidence pointing to the fact that the cartel is active here. And if you speak to retired Major General Andre Lincoln, he's the focus of my new book, Man Alone. He's gone on record before saying that every single cartel in the world has a representative in South Africa. Now that's it's like we're sitting with a gang problem. Now add international cartels to that, which means that some of the killings we're seeing, which we may dismiss as like, oh, that person was just shot in a street corner, may actually be an orchestrated hit that has been planned in another country. And this has happened before. So last year, if you were here for the presentation I did on drug cartels, there's a a drug baron, a drug kingpin, who's detained, or he may not be detained anymore in the US because he's turned state witness. But he went on record in court there saying, oh yeah, we orchestrated this murder from Kenya, and the person was shot in South Africa. He was shot something like 32 times. So it is happening. The most frustrating part is that obviously we aren't told it's happening. It's for us to find out, or for me to find out as a journalist, but I can tell you it is happening. Also from Clash of the Cartels, based on certain police officers, Cosa Nostra Mafiosa, so that's Italy. They bought large farms in the Western Cape from where they commit or concoct their crimes. So, you know, when you're driving in the winelands and stuff and you're looking at those farms, you think, oh, it's such a nice sunny day. I have a completely different thought. I'm like, oh, I wonder what's happening there. So, but yeah. So this is Peter Jaggers over there posing with what appears to be a very real firearm. I can't confirm if it is or isn't. That photograph was sourced from Facebook. So this is a really bizarre tale, but Peter Jaggers is from the suburb of Netrecht in Cape Town. Netrecht is a suburb that under the Group Areas Act, people who are non-white were forced there. Okay, so that aside. Peter Jaggers and his associate William Peterson went missing sometime last year, okay? And then weird theories did the rounds and there was actually a sea rescue off the coast, okay? I can't remember where exactly. We have covered this for Daily Maverick. There was a sea rescue. And theories did the rounds that the people who were rescued didn't really need rescuing, but these are all theories. Nothing's been confirmed yet. But what is fact is that the overriding theory was that Peter Jaggers and William Peterson got involved with the Colombian cartel, which means, oh no, now the Colombians are here. Now we've got a real problem. And it's serious. Okay, we don't know what actually happened, but what is fact, and I always say this, in organized crime, the fact often takes the form of a dead body because there's so many stories and counter stories spun around it. The fact often emerges when someone is killed. It's tragic, but it's fact and it's truth. So Peter Jaggers' body, along with William Peterson's, were found in a Free State river in October 2024. Their bodies were basically covered in like a plastic material and very tightly bound. Police have confirmed their bodies were found. What led up to that? But it's actually, yeah, like it's chilling and creepy, yeah. So if you look at the port of Durban, it is undeniably favored by drug traffickers from across the world. Now, what worries me about this is that we've reported extensively, and the SAPs have extensively explained to us, a consignment of cocaine worth X many millions has been intercepted at Durban Harbour, or a ship is stopped or raided just before it enters, etc., etc., etc. Okay, that's the cocaine they're intercepting at Durban. What are they not intercepting? And we've had instances where police officers or law enforcement officers have been arrested in connection with this, which again shows that organized crime is really entwined in everything. And just the other day I was thinking, you know, when you order something online and you're waiting for it to be delivered and it's like shipping in progress or something, I wonder what is actually landing in South Africa with like our fruit and vegetables. One of the things traffickers prefer is to hide their stashes of drugs in consignments of either fresh produce or like frozen chicken. A lot of the frozen chicken coming from Brazil was found with like a stash of cocaine on the side. I don't think the cocaine actually touched the chicken. In case you're wondering, like, oh, it's Sunday roast. But that's what they prefer, that because it has to go through the harbor quicker. So this is like, it's scary. And the weird thing is about Durban Harbour, I've asked Transnet for comment about this. Now we are like in year 3. I'm still waiting for a response. What on earth is happening with security there? Apparently at one stage they were building a secure perimeter fence. Okay, so if they're building the fence, what is there at the moment? I'm pretty certain if I go, I will get onto like Durban Harbour and then get arrested for trespassing. I'll be the one person. So, which brings me to, so we've dealt with the sea, right? We've dealt with the sea. Durban is a weird hotspot. It's a preferred port. We won't go into the potential reasons, but who and what are you on a plane with? So this is another thing that always happens to me when I'm sitting at an airport You know, when you're just kind of like zoning out and wondering, oh, I wonder where that person's traveling to. I'm always like, oh, I wonder if anyone here has something in their bag. Because, like, I kind of don't want to be on that flight, but we just don't know. So, in December last year, over, I think it was about 4 or 5 months, police in South Africa caught roughly a dozen, like I think it was 13 the last I checked, drug mules at our Tambo International Airport, and most of them had ties to Brazil. Okay, so here's the thing though, they were caught, it's a horrible crime, and without wanting to sound sympathetic towards a criminal, it really is a crime that appears to be driven by desperation in many cases, people that really need the money. So these individuals were either found, like you can see over there, she's got a cocaine belt around her waist, or, and I should have maybe shown it better, but on the side over there, you can see the X-ray. It's what they call condoms of cocaine. So they pack like balloons with cocaine, so into bullets about that big, and you have to ingest them or in whichever way your body can accommodate it. And if you look at the X-rays, you wonder how on earth are these people managing to sit comfortably on a plane for hours at a time? So while this has been happening in South Africa, in Brazil, they've picked up an increase in drug mules, which are what these traffickers are called. And they found recently like a house where they prepare drug mules. So almost like a drug mule manufacturing facility where you're given medication to keep the medication, to keep the drugs down, etc. So this is highly organized crime. And again, this is really where greed meets desperation. So a counter to this is that many of my contacts and sources, etc., questioned whether these drug mule arrests were legitimate. Okay, now the arrests themselves are fine, but they were questioning whether these were to detract from bigger consignments. And yeah, the most frustrating thing for me as a journalist is I can only write it as a theory because unless the bigger consignment is intercepted, we simply don't know. Just FYI, many of these individuals, on the flip side, when you leave South Africa with drugs and you end up, I think it's Mauritius, you spend like years in jail without even a trial. Yeah. So I just want to show you some examples of other ways of air trafficking, so-called air trafficking. You have baggage handlers, who between Australia and South Africa, this has been big, baggage handlers sneaking the cocaine into a plane in a normal rucksack, travel bag, whatever, and that's how they're getting it across countries. Then you've got sort of smaller cases where just very recently, this was last month, a man was arrested in Australia, a plane worker. He had cocaine, it seemed, in shampoo. And I just saw on the Australian Federal Police's website today, there was another weird shampoo drug arrest. So literally you can put drugs in anything. One of the other things I'm very keen to explore is saturating fabric with it. So just imagine you know, like when you get washing powder, you don't wash it off properly. If you see someone with a crusted dress on the airport, do not sit next to them. Yeah. So now we've done a nice global view. Let's magnify things. So we're going to go with a name that's a bit, actually, the name is controversial for various reasons. Okay. So here we have Mark Liffman. Okay. What do those mms mean? But yeah. So he was murdered in George, the Western Cape Town of George, on the 3rd of November, 2024. Okay, now at the time of his murder, he was accused of being part of a plot to murder an international steroid smuggler, Brian Weinstein. Okay, Brian Weinstein was murdered in Constantia in August 2017. So Mark Liffman has always flat out denied any links to criminality whatsoever. He's been in and out of court for various things. The South African Revenue Service was after him. Be that as it may, he was murdered. And like I said earlier, and like I've said many times before, the truth of organized crime is tragically in the murder toll. And we're going to go through, sadly, so many murders on these slides, but sadly, that is the reality. That's where we see it most clearly. So the two suspects arrested for Mark Liffman's murder, they have combined links to the South African Police Service and to private security. Now, I want to make this very clear. They weren't The two suspects weren't officially employed or permanently employed by the company PPA Security, but it appears they did contract work and they had links to the company. And that really sort of makes us look at the company and be like, what are you doing? The company hasn't been accused of any wrongdoing. They were raided in, I think, November, December, but they've said they're cooperating with cops. The reason PPA Security was raided was because police seized firearms, and we assume they're ballistically testing the firearms and will say X, Y, and Z wasn't used in a crime, it was used in a crime, who knows. But yeah, the reason I bring this up is because we think of organized crime and then we think of the law enforcers. Okay, when we think of SAPs, we're not quite sure at times, but that's what we are brought up thinking perhaps. But here we have private security in the spotlight. Now, Mark Liftman was involved in private security, even though he tried to distance himself from it. But let's see what comes out of what's playing out in court, etc. This specific case aside, there are absolute suspicions that some companies are fronts for criminals, so fronts for gangsters. And the way this is done is that I can ask, okay, I'm not the criminal, but I can ask my sister, for example, to please register a security company, do all the paperwork, etc. It looks above board. We then apply for firearm licenses and go through all that hoopla, and we get the firearms. What do we do with them? And I think we're seeing the private security industry regulatory authority, they seem to be stepping in. Just last week, we had 2 security companies in a shootout in Nyanga over taxis. Okay, so they were apparently providing security to taxi people. There was a shootout, 7 people were wounded. 1 person was murdered. Okay, and that is private security. So what I'm just trying to explain is that, like I said, it has no boundaries and it seeps into everything. It can potentially seep into the people we rely on to protect us. And I know it seems obvious, but I think it isn't actually that obvious because you're just living your life. You don't see private security, criminal. You don't see it, but it is happening around us. So Mark Liftman faced accusations that he basically headed a faction of men, mostly men, who were hell-bent on dominating nightclub security in Cape Town. Now, this we know about, I hope. Be careful if you don't. But this is covered in my book, The Enforcers, extensively. And Mark Liftman's alleged rivals included fellow now murder-accused Nafiz Modak. So we've got Nafiz Modak over here. Let me just see. There we go. That's him. And this is Andre Nodier, who is an associate of Mark Liftman's. So basically, according to cops and according to the state and accusations/allegations, these were 2 warring factions, okay? And they were focused at one stage on Cape Town city center. So at the center of the accusations, all that aside, we've got venues. We've got places we potentially eat out at. We've got places we visit. And this, again, it goes back to what I mentioned earlier with Dobrosov coverage. It means that if you're going out to a specific place, and even if that place is a victim of crime, if that place is being extorted, and you don't know the security being provided there is being provided by force, you are still giving money to a company that is paying an extortionist, and thereby your money could end up in the pockets of a criminal. So this is Beer House in Long Street. This is a clear-cut example of what this can lead to. So a doorman at Beer House, Joe Canyona, he was a father. He was murdered like at the entrance of Beer House in 2015. He was stabbed. It was a very weird case. It came out in court. I actually sat through some of those proceedings that his killers formed a shield around him so that the CCTV camera couldn't pick it up, and he was stabbed in the neck, basically. So he was stabbed after Beer House's owner, Randolph Jorberg, refused to sign up with a group offering services, which they tried to purport was security. Beer House closed last year. That's literally a picture of its closed door. I'm going to take a photograph because I'd like to use this. Sorry. It just makes me really sad because we're not talking about a venue, we're talking about jobs, we're talking about people who work there, people who relied on the income, we're talking about foot traffic outside, we're talking about the car guard right outside there. I know it's Long Street, but think like the whole chain of people being affected here. So when Beer House closed, Randolph Jorberg, the owner, said it was because of extortion-related issues. Now we're talking about 2024, okay? Joe Kanyona was murdered in 2015. That's 9 years later. If he's closing now, what has changed? What hasn't changed? Is this still happening? I feel like as the public, we deserve to know there was an extortion hotline set up around this, mainly at one stage, and we just don't know. So before I move on from Mark Liffman, I just want to point out that the name or the name of this presentation is Organized Crime on Our Doorstep. And this feeds into my next presentation, which I beg you to come to. We'll get there. On, I think about 2 weeks before Mark Liffman was murdered, I had these strange phone calls to my cell phone, and these people were calling from private investigative firms, or not law firms, it was like debt collecting firms. I could see on Truecaller, it would come up like debt collector. I was like, I don't owe anyone anything. And they were trying to get my details, which I found strange because I work at Daily Maverick, and I gave them my Daily Maverick details. And I'll never forget the one lady was like, are you sure? And then I'm thinking, maybe she doesn't want to embarrass me because they're going to send me something private. Okay, so that went on for about a week. And then the Friday, I think it was, about a week before his murder, the Friday, there was banging on my gate in front of my house, my personal home, on my doorstep, folks. And it was the sheriff of the court with a letter of demand from Mark Liffman saying he's going to sue me, and I've run a discrediting campaign against him for 10 years. Now, I can assure you, I don't have the time to run a discrediting campaign. There's a lot going on in South Africa. What worries me about that is that it's usual common practice for those letters of demand to be sent to a journalist via email. So I just wanted to point that out because it's really, for me, it comes right literally to my doorstep. My home address was listed in that document, and had that document gone further, that's it. That's it for me. So extortion affects us all, like I think I've fleshed out there. The roads we're driving could be hijacked business projects. We've seen this happen. A new public building could be the project of a dodgy tender. Homes being built can be the product of a dodgy tender. So this impacts commuters, motorists, workers, those running companies, those working at companies, people desperate for homes. I think that's one of the saddest things. I've written for Daily Maverick how housing projects where people have been on a housing waiting list for like 25 years, they're still waiting now because their project, where their house is meant to be, had to be put aside because of suspected corruption. So yeah, people desperate for homes, pensioners and children. We've got horrific stories. My colleague Estelle Ellis wrote on this, how pensioners are extorted, how school children are extorted. We've heard how parking attendants in certain parts of Cape Town are just demanding money or they're going to do something to your car. That's extortion. So extortion bleeds into various other crimes. Okay, and I just, oh my gosh, this figure, I'm a journalist, I'm not good at maths, but when I see 63 BN, it's like, that's look how much money, 5 years, 63 billion rand has been disrupted by the so-called construction mafia. Okay, so this sounds like a broad sweeping thing, so let's get into it. So here's a case study. And this is a nice one because it really brings together what the fabric and texture of organized crime. This is a collision of gang, construction mafia, and collusion suspicions. Okay? So over here, we've got Ralph Stanfield. He is the alleged 28th gang boss. And we know the 28th gang is one of the numbers gangs. And I don't want to give them power and say the most dangerous, but I do believe they're potentially the most dangerous gang in the Western Cape, given their, I don't want to say clout, but given their disgusting criminal behavior. So we've got Ralph Stanfield, police allege, the state alleges he heads the 28th gang, and that's his wife, Nicole Johnson. They were arrested in September 2023 in a case that's sort of just, it's grown. And they are appearing in court, I believe, next week again. They are yet to plead. So everything I'm talking about, your accusations against them, and we'll see what comes of it. And perhaps I should just go back to that. What's freaky here is that we're talking about accusations against them. If they are, for whatever reason, exonerated, if they turn out to be not guilty, then we have to look at, okay, was this a smear campaign against them? Were they discredited? And why? To hide what? Come to my next lecture. I'm joking. So this is a joint Amabungane and Daily Maverick investigation. This was me and my colleague Graham Hoskin at Amabungane. Shout out to Graham, because this was difficult. So you can see there that Stanfield and Johnson raked in millions of rands after becoming embedded in the construction of a 3 billion rand King A industrial project, okay? So I just want to show you this, not to say that anyone here did outright wrong, because at the time, Ralph Stanfield and Nicole Johnson were crime suspects, and they did business with, as we can see here, Atterbury and Old Mutual. Okay, and I'm just showing you the extensive reach. When a while after that article came out, the city of Cape Town put out a statement actually saying they're focusing on eradicating construction mafia crimes. So basically, we can extrapolate that that's kind of like a warning to corporate South Africa or corporate Cape Town, like be careful of who you do business with, okay? So like I said, this case really does bleed into everything. And again, it goes to a venue. That is a Yip Yip. It's in Loop Street in Cape Town city center. Okay. So this venue was closed in 2023, August 2023, after accusations by the then co-owner, Kagiso Setsetse. He basically alleged that Ralph Stanfield and Nicole Johnson were muscling in and trying to forcefully take over this venue. What happened is that Mr. Setsetse reached a settlement, and now the venue is partially owned by Nicole Johnson's mother, Barbara Johnson. The venue is reopened. You can drive past. It's actually weirdly easy to miss during the day. Like for a long time, I drove past there like whatever. And then I was like, I actually went to look and it's up and running, business as usual. It's quite scary. So this is where we really get a convergence of things that's scary, because think about your money that you're paying, your taxes, where are they going? What is happening here? So in September 2024, former DA City of Cape Town Human Settlements Mako member, I emphasize human settlements. People need houses. People are waiting for houses. So he was arrested. He is accused, and again, he hasn't pleaded either. The case hasn't reached that stage, but he's accused of colluding with Ralph Stanfield and Nicole Johnson, okay, in a 1 billion rand tender enterprise. So basically like, maybe giving a little bit of information and you get that tender, that sort of thing. If that wasn't bad enough, and again, this like, my heart feels sore when I say it, but you know, the truth of organized crime is in the death toll, the murder toll. It's not even a death toll because this is killing, it's taking away life unnaturally. One of the co-accused in this case, Abdul Kader Davids, was murdered in Cape Town on the 20th of September 2024, 2 days after being granted bail in this case. This case really, it gives me the shivers, but it really does just go everywhere. And again, it's just sad because you're literally seeing faces of people who, whether they are right or wrong, guilty or not guilty, they're yet to plead, but people's lives are being ruined and we're seeing a fraction of it. And that's why I snuck this in this morning. I was done with this presentation. And then I was like, no, I want to show you. So I hope it's coming across. But this is an article from November 2023, okay? I reported that a company with suspected ties to the 28th gang was building houses for the Western Cape government. Now that much has basically been confirmed since, like the company's been blacklisted by National Treasury, by the way, Glomix, okay? So what I managed to find out was that a murdered man's signature on a National Department of, it was Defense document, suggests an interlinked company secured a government contract in the defense sector. Okay, so this is the extent of this. It's another murdered person, and this is a graphic from Daily Maverick. My colleague Rudy Lowe created it, but I just want to show you how it almost all bleeds into each other. There you've got the signature on the document there. This person is basically being murdered. I think one of the horriblest part of this whole case is that aside from Malusi Boy, aside from Ralph Stanfield and Nicole Johnson, there are many other accused who have been added to the case. And among those accused are individuals charged with the murder of a City of Cape Town official, Wendy Kloppers, in February 2023. She was gunned down at a housing development site, a building project. So you can see you've got a City of Cape Town official facing charges with individuals accused of murdering another City of Cape Town official. There are tenders, and then we look further and you see an establishment and a yep, it's all scary. But let's see what comes of that. So zoom back out and in again, okay? So we know all this is happening in South Africa. We know there's extortion, right? I mean, it's one of the rare things that government can't really hide because it's gouging into them as well. It's gouging into their own projects. So there's extortion, there's drug trafficking, corruption, state capture. We know it's happening around us and we may not even realize it. And that's the scary part. And that's what I'm trying to impart. I hope I'm not scaring you, but I hope you feel a tiny bit worried. So we're definitely part of a web of illegality. Okay, it's clear drug trafficking. If the Sinaloa cartel is operating, you think about it very carefully. There needs to be a chain of command. The drugs need to be made, those drugs need to be moved around. If those drugs leave South Africa, you need people at the ports, you need transporters, you need corrupt officials. So we're really entrenched in this. This is a graphic I did a few years ago, or I tried to do a few years ago for Daily Maverick. It got wild. But you can see, for example, there's Pablo Escobar at the top. There's certain police officers, good or bad. There's Charles Kinnear, who was murdered in September 2020. There's Andre Lincoln, who was forced out the police. He appealed, was allowed back in, and it's scary. So these are the players. We've got good police officers, we've got bad police officers. Come to my next lecture. We've got George Darmanovich, a state security agency contract worker who turned out to be an information and disinformation peddler of note, who was murdered in Serbia. So you can see, we talk about South African organized crime. What we're always talking about inevitably is actually global organized crime. We're just framing it a little differently. So now I don't even want to go to the next slide. I'm just checking it is that one. Yes, it is. So I've given you this presentation like I know stuff. I know what's going on around us, right? I know about cartels. I know about extortion, corruption, disinformation campaigns. Silly old me. Okay. Now, I'm a nerd. When I created this presentation, I redid it, I rejigged it, I took out slides, I put slides back in. I wanted to impart something of worth to you, and I genuinely mean that. So I'd dip into it a few times, and now I just want to cry when I tell you this. So while creating this presentation earlier this month, like I was still polishing it here and there was a delivery to my house, again, my front door. And in the process, I took myself and I saw the deliveries here, the phone rings. Okay, cool. I keep the laptop open because weirdly my PowerPoint does something strange if I close it. The presentation disappears. I left it open, went outside, tucked my phone into a flower pot just next to my door, which is behind the gate. Accepted the delivery, closed the gate, went inside, and my cell phone was stolen within seconds. So the irony is that I was creating a presentation on crime on our doorstep, and I had a crime on my doorstep. And it almost broke my heart a little because there's just no escaping it. And that's what I was trying to get this across, and I was like, I'm such an idiot. I really was. I should know better. And as a journalist, I should have known a lot better. As a crime journalist, silly girl. But I just want to show you the harsh reality. I somehow managed to still have the ability to. I was in such a panic. I can't explain to you. No one was with me. So how do I tell people? But I luckily had my WhatsApp web open, and I managed to track my phone from my home all the way to Cape Town station. The security officers from the neighborhood accompanied me to Cape Town station when we realized this may not have been the best idea. So I let it go, did what I have to, and the phone is now gone. But again, that just shows you how saturating criminality is. And a part of me really wants to know, where did the phone go? Did it stay in South Africa? And I could technically find that out, but I do believe that would be a waste of resources at this stage when we're sitting with, we're in the province with the highest gang murder toll. So this is the part where I beg you, before we go into questions, but please do come to my next presentation, Disinformation Nation. I know it sounds a bit dry and boring, but the more I looked into it, I was like, this is insane. So for me, and how I'd like to end this is that we've looked at some crazy things. We've looked at people who've been murdered. We know crime is saturating venues. It's saturating, it's saturating everything, right? The roads we drive on, where we're parking. Like my doorstep, my actual doorstep, where the same letter of intent remarkablement was served. But what scares me more than all that is disinformation, because that is invisible. We talk about invisible crime, it's very difficult to pick up, and journalists are used, and I can see where there have been attempts, and I will expose and explore those attempts. When I say expose, it sounds fancy. I don't mean like I'm going to expose, but I will show you how we are used. And some of the characters, like I mentioned earlier, George Darmanovich, a state security agent, contract worker, murdered in Serbia while he's peddling information about Cape Town's so-called underworld. It's terrifying. And that is genuinely something I wake up with. And, I fear that in 2 years or 3 years, I'm going to find out that something I've written about wasn't that. And it was a campaign, because these campaigns are highly organized. They're orchestrated from deep state. And that for me is another type of terrifying, ugly, organized crime that's, I wanted to be like it, I nearly swore, but it poops on our rights. It poops on our human rights. So with that, I hope you've managed to keep track. I whizzed through this, but I want to leave time for questions, and I open the floor to you. Thank you. You.